saying staff at FEMA caught off guard as the agency's new acting head told them he previously didn't know the U.S. actually has a hurricane season. He said this at a briefing just yesterday. According to multiple sources, some thought the remark was a joke, but others said it raised very serious concerns about the acting administrator's experience. CNN's Gabe Cohen has been covering the story for us. He's joining us here in the Situation Room with more. Concern is already rising over FEMA's preparedness. How are federal officials responding?
Yeah, and Wolf, as you mentioned, to be clear, there were plenty of FEMA staffers who heard this yesterday on this briefing call and thought this must be a joke. And that is what the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees FEMA, has said it was. They told me, quote, FEMA is laser focused on disaster response and protecting the American people. But I also spoke with some FEMA personnel who were inside that briefing yesterday who couldn't really tell if David Richardson, FEMA's new acting administrator, was kidding around or if he was essentially saying that he was pretty unfamiliar with hurricane season before taking this new job last month. You may remember when he was put in charge last month by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, he had no prior experience managing natural disaster. He comes from the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office at DHS, and this has just raised red flags among FEMA staff about the lack of experience at the top as hurricane season is now underway, and who's going to be making those decisions with what information when lives need to be saved and potentially communities need to be preserved during these catastrophic storms.
He wasn't joking. It's obviously very serious. And it underscores his lack of experience in dealing with these kinds of issues as he's the acting FEMA director right now. We've also learned, Gabe, as you know, that FEMA is not putting out a new disaster plan for this upcoming hurricane season, which is about to begin. What's the significance there?
Yeah, so that also came out of this briefing. We heard Richardson say that despite what FEMA had previously said that they were going to be putting together this new plan, that in fact they are not going to be putting out a new disaster plan. And the significance there is that, look, Homeland Security has come in. They have exerted extreme control over FEMA in recent months. And we saw them just a few weeks ago get rid of FEMA's strategic plan for the rest of the year. And it has left so many FEMA officials, from top senior leaders down to rank and file, wondering, what is our mission this summer? What resources are going to be in place? Because remember, there have been extensive staffing cuts. Some 10% of FEMA is gone, 30% expected to be out by the end of the year. And so there's a lot of confusion, a lack of guidance, and this only underscores what they're heading into and that confusion as hurricanes potentially hit in the weeks ahead.
People who live in those potential hurricane zones should be very, very concerned right now. Gabe Cohen, thank you very much.
That's why we have the federal expertise and we need the federal resources, because the scale of these storms are so massive. To eliminate FEMA would be a man-made disaster when we need FEMA to respond to natural disasters.
That's North Carolina Governor Josh Stein calling for FEMA to be spared, not slashed. And I want you to look at this headline from the New York Times, because it zeroes in on the senior leaders leaving an already depleted agency that could lose even more of its workforce by the end of the year. Now, this comes as multiple sources say the acting head of FEMA, David Richardson, claimed in a briefing that he was previously unaware the U.S. even has a hurricane season. A rep for the Homeland Security Department says the comment was made in jest, adding FEMA is laser focused on disaster response and protecting people. Joining me now to discuss is former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Deanne, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Audie. Thanks for having me.
So one of the things we've learned is that the acting head of FEMA had actually scrapped the agency's strategic plan, right? And which is a plan I think you were involved in. Can you talk about what that means? How should we think about hurricane season when strategy cut and people and resources cut?
Audie, the strategic plan really provides the vision for the entire agency, not just the response and recovery to hurricane season, but for every part of the agency, whether it's resilience in building communities back stronger, how we're going to respond, but also how we're going to support our workforce. It really gives that leadership intent. And with that gone and not something in place, I think that there's still some ambiguity then as to what's going to be expected of FEMA coming into this hurricane season.
I was learning, for example, that one thing FEMA would do is go door to door, right, to have a program where you would actually deal with survivors. That's the kind of thing that might be cut here. You told our producers that there was a contract of more than $20 million that now has to go through DHS for approval first. I'm asking about this because we've also seen states not get the relief they've requested right away. Arkansas, Washington State, North Carolina. I mean, at certain points, they were denied emergency disaster relief. So what does it mean that this new system has to go through DHS and essentially get approval before you just get the support you need?
One of the things that is the most important when you are responding to one of these severe weather events or as you begin the recovery process is making sure that you can do it in a way that's efficient and timely to get help where it's needed most, when it's needed most. And anytime you add a layer of bureaucracy, like having to get additional approvals for something that in the past was able to be done through the FEMA administrator, is just going to delay that ability to be able to respond. And that can put lives at risk, right? We want to be able to pre-position resources. You want to get them in place ahead of the storm, and you want to be able to employ them as soon as the storm passes. And you need to be able to have the freedom and the autonomy to do that without extra layers of scrutiny. That's one of the reasons in PCHEMRA why the FEMA administrator was given a direct line to the president when it comes to disaster response to make sure that that extra layer of bureaucracy didn't happen.
We're at the end, I think, maybe towards the end of tornado season. There were more than 60 deaths. What are your concerns going ahead for hurricane season?
Just making sure that FEMA knows what the role is that they're going to play, right? As you said, we used to go door to door. FEMA used to go door to door. There's so many people that when these storms happen, they don't have electricity and they don't have cell coverage. And one of the ways that they can access that immediate assistance is by having some of these teams, they go door to door and they make sure that they've entered the system. But also making sure that they know whether or not they're going to be able to get that disaster declaration. It's really about partnerships between FEMA, the state, and the local. States and locals always have the primary responsibility for response and recovery. FEMA just augments that. And if states are unsure if they're going to get that help, it's just going to make it harder for them to protect their communities.
That's former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Thank you for your time.